What's going on, passionate Pokemon players? I'm Ryan, and here we are for another episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. Excited today to get into the deck that we have. It is, as I hinted at for those that watched my last video with the Kangaskhan EX, it's a similar concept, but at the same time very different, and we are moving out of what I usually do just for this video. Okay, I got plenty more planned. Moving kind of away from the old school Pokemon, and this one will be in Pokemon that are more new, right? As the video suggests, it is Dondonzo and Tatsugiri. When this format came out, the kind of, or not the format, but the mechanic of using Tatsugiri and Dondonzo, where you're discarding your Tatsugiris so that your Dondonzo is doing more damage, I thought it was just a really cool concept. So it was a very old deck that I made and had some solid success with it as well online. So kind of finally went back to it and gave it some updates, because that was what, maybe Paldea evolved or something like that. So it was a while back now. We're getting into it. So it needed a few updates. There were some cards that had rotated out of it. I actually had a physical copy of the deck too, and I was like, oh man, I've got like Clara in there and Battle VIP Pass and stuff like that. So I was able to update that, and it actually works out potentially even better than it did back then. But you know, we'll kind of see how we go and how you all like it. So we're going to go ahead and get into previewing each card in the deck, why I included it, strength, strategies, weaknesses of the deck as well. And then finally, we'll think about some other cards that we may consider swapping into the deck. Before we do that, though, please hit that subscribe button so you can become part of the Hawks Nest. We are a fabulous flock of fearless folks who love to do what we love. I love making these decks. I'm interested in what you all love to do. Hopefully you love to watch this, but hopefully you've also got some other good interests that you want to pursue. And I really challenge you to pursue those this year. You know, what is it that you love? Because look, that's how you reach peak performance, and that's also what the Hawks Nest is about, is just being the best version of ourselves and attaining peak performance. So if you're not quite ready yet to fly, I know some of you are still fledglings, just hit that like button. Hopefully we'll show up in an algorithm near you for the future. Leave me a comment, let me know what you think, let me know if you want to kind of have any ideas of cards that I may want to swap in or out of this deck. And of course, make sure that you stay tuned, because we've got another episode coming at the end of the week where we're going to take this deck to TCG Live and do some damage there. So let's jump into it now. All right, now we've got the deck up here. We have Dondonzo. Let's go over the Pokemon first, as is pretty obvious. You know, the first one we're going to go with 4 Dondonzos. And look, if you look real closely, you can see Dondonzo's got the little Tatsugiri in his mouth. So we've got 4 of those and 4 Tatsugiris. Of course, right? We want to be able to make sure that we're going to throw 2 of those, or not 2, so all of those Tatsugiris in the discard pile, because we're going to only be using this Release Rage attack for 2 energy. It's going to do 50 damage for each Tatsugiri in your discard pile, which means if you get all 4 Tatsugiri in discard, we're going to be able to hit for 200 damage. Potentially less, as I talk about the mechanic to really make this easy and make sure that we've always got Dondonzo ready. We'll be using a double turbo energy, so we're going to be subtracting 20, but I think it still works well. His other attack, Heavy Splash, needs 4 damage for 120. Do not even think about loading up 4 energy on him and trying to get that, right? Now, Tatsugiri, we really don't want to attack, but I will say that if you kind of get caught with a Tatsugiri in the active spot, which is going to happen to you because we do only have a grand total of 10 Pokemon, period. They are all basics again, like the Kangaskhan EX deck, but you are going to get caught where Tatsugiri is your only one that you're drawing. So you do have the Mise en Place, which is search your deck for up to 2 water energy and attach them to one of your basic Pokemon, shuffle your deck. If you are able to kind of get that, throw 1 energy on him, then you can potentially throw one of those on Dondonzo, and you're able to kind of get him where you don't need to subtract that. But what I'd actually recommend doing is, here we've got our great Radiant Greninja. Probably go ahead and just, if you can get your Greninja on your bench, I might prioritize attaching to the Greninja, so that way you've got 2 energy. You just need 1 more for a Moonlight Shuriken, which does sometimes come in clutch. as we go. It's not something I'm often using. I actually put in a good amount of practice in this deck because I wanted to. I hadn't used it in so long, and I really wanted to make sure I had optimized the cards in it. And I hadn't used Moonlight Shuriken too often, but it's something that is kind of good to know on that end. Another great thing is if you could get your Squawkabilly EX on your bench or an active if necessary during your first turn, so you can use Squawk and Seize. That's going to help you at the very least cycle through your deck so you can get your Tatsugiri in hand if you don't have them. But you know, obviously if you can get a couple in hand at least before you use Squawk and Seize, that's going to help you to get those Tatsugiri in discard. That's really your number one priority, is getting Tatsugiris in discard. Otherwise our Dondonzo's not doing anything because it's 50x, right? So let's go back and have a look real quick. 50x. So if you have 0 Tatsugiri in discard, you ain't doing any damage. And let's get into the trainer cards for this deck. Start off really quickly with Brilliant Blender. I think this one is such a cool card. It's for this deck specifically, right? You're going to search your deck to up to 5 cards and discard them, then shuffle your deck. If you could get this into your hand early and you've got all of your Tatsugiri still in your deck, you could discard all 4 just with this card if you don't have any prized. And then from there, I oftentimes will use it for thinning. You know, let's say that I don't, you know, I've got my Brilliant Blender, I've got all the Tatsugiri in discard. I may start discarding some other cards that I know I'm not going to need, maybe some of those Ultra Balls, maybe even like a penny or 2, just because we want to get this deck thinned out as well. I mean, thinning is winning, so once you get everything you need, it is a good card. I will say though that I oftentimes don't use all 5. It is up to 5, so sometimes I'm only going to do 4. I've even gone occasionally as low as just discarding 3, because I do want to have the cards I need in deck, right? I mean, I'm not just going to discard Boss's Orders or Professor's Research or even pennies just for the sake of it, right? Another one I'm going to search out is if I know I don't need my Hisuian Heavy Balls, then definitely that's a great one to discard with your Brilliant Blender. Just going to help you. The more unnecessary cards that are discarded, the better chance you have of getting the cards back in hand you need if you're going to get a Roxanne, or if you get Ionoed or Unfair Stamp or things like that, right? Then next up we have, again, like the Kangaskhan deck. This is actually where I first used the Energy Lotto, and it's actually somebody at a locals who showed it to me, and I never really thought of using this card. I never thought it was that great. I was like, well, you know, I'm just going to put the energy I need. But the Energy Lotto is such a great card for trying to search out the double turbo energy, because there's no way. I mean, there's a few cards and there's a few different ways we could play the Dondonzo to get those special energies if we want, or maybe even, you know, not even use special energies. But Energy Lotto, I think, is just the best way. We can pull it out with Irida and hope that we get it. So we're going to be looking at the top 7 of our deck, revealing an energy card and putting it into our hand. So pretty good way of going. I'm going to go with 4 of those. Excuse me, I've got 4 of most every trainer in here, but we do have 3 of a few of them. And next up, we've got the Hisuian Heavy Ball. That one's, I mean, those are so necessary cards, and hopefully you don't get more than 2 Tatsugiri prized. But, I mean, you need those Heavy Balls, because if your Tatsugiri are prized, it just really hamstrings this deck, because obviously you need to do damage to take prize cards. So if you've got more than 1 of them prized, then we're in big trouble. So you want to definitely figure that out quickly. You know, how many, and do I have Tatsugiri prized, and how am I going to deal with that in the Heavy Ball? So I'm going to only play 2. I think it's enough. You're usually able to draw your Heavy Ball with an Irida, or, you know, you can research into getting it. So 2 of them I find is enough. I've never had issues getting my Tatsugiris from my prized if necessary. Again, at the same time too, you might need them for any other things. Your Radiant Greninja being prized, your Dondonzo being prized. You do want to have all 4 of those so that you're able to really cycle through. So Heavy Ball's a good card for this deck. If you want to throw in 3, maybe take out something. I mean, I don't know what, maybe a Boss's, but like I said, I think you're good with just the 2. Nest.l, of course, we've got 4 Nest.balls. This is another deck that, interestingly enough, our Dondonzo is not an EX. an attacker, but he does have enough HP to where our Buddy Poffins aren't working. You know, we do have Tatsugiris, but we're never going to want Tatsugiri to get onto the bench. We want to get that in hand and then discard it, so we're going to use an Ultra Ball for that. Poffin obviously wouldn't work either because it's throwing Tatsugiri straight to bench. So our Nest Balls are really so that we're able to get our Dondonzo, our Squawkabilly, or our Radiant Greninja on bench. So of course we're going with 4 of those. Night Stretcher, just one of my favorite cards. It's rare, if ever, you're going to see a list that I'm making without 3 or 4 Night Stretchers. This one's another one where it is really necessary. A lot of times I'm going to be using them just to pull back my water energies to keep my hand cycling going with Radiant Greninja. So that's often what I'm using them for, especially because I'm not wanting to discard a double turbo energy with Radiant Greninja if that's what I have in hand. So Night Stretcher helps us. And then at the same time too, of course, we can get a Pokemon. So if somebody is gonna, knock out our Radiant Greninja, we could grab him back. Or maybe we don't draw a Dondonzo and you want to have a sure chance of getting that Dondonzo, then you're just gonna Night Stretcher, throw that bad boy back on the bench. Trekking Shoes. This one was one that helps in a few ways. Obviously, we're able to help us draw, but also if that first card that we get with the Trekking Shoes is a Tatsugiri, we can obviously put that into the discard and draw another card. So just more ways of being able to get rid of Tatsugiris and throw them in the discard, while at the same time helping us to cycle through our deck. Ultra Ball, I've got Ultra Balls in there, really put to pull Tatsugiris. A lot of times, hopefully I'm going to have a Tatsugiri in hand, Ultra Ball into another Tatsugiri if need be, or a Dondonzo or whatever else I need. So this one, the more cards we have to discard in hand, the better. So that's what this Ultra Ball is going to help us do. And, in a pinch, if we haven't pulled a Nest Ball, we can use that to pull the Pokemon that we want. But usually really try not to use your Ultra Ball unless you have at least one Tatsugiri in hand. That's something I find myself doing, okay? Then Boss's Orders. I feel like I'm able to fit 4 Boss's Orders this time, especially because you do find your opponents are going to be retreating a lot. Your Dondonzo at max strength is usually going to be hitting for 180, so it's not going to one-shot a lot of Pokemon, but we're going to be playing the mechanic to where, yeah, they can't one-shot. You can't one-shot, but at the same time, if all goes well with our Dondonzos, they can't one-shot him either, which means that it's going to take each of you 2 turns to knock a Pokemon out, but you're usually going to be taking 2 for that, unless they are playing a basic Pokemon or a non-EX, then your Dondonzo often can knock him out and take 1 prizer, but a lot of times what they're going to try to do to avoid that is retreat that Pokemon so you can boss him right back up and knock him out. Or a lot of times too, you can target things like Mew EXs or Squawkabillies on the bench, and you can one-shot those with your Tatsugiri for the 180, right? So Boss's Orders is a really good card in this deck. I usually have run 3, but this time I felt like I wanted to have 4. Irida, another just perfect card for this deck. It is water-based deck, so Irida is going to give you your water Pokemon in an item card. A lot of times, you can work around that, whether you grab a Tatsugiri and an Ultra Ball to discard, or maybe you're grabbing a Dondonzo and an Energy Loto so that you can, roll the dice and hope that you're able to pull a double turbo energy. All kinds of things that you can do. Obviously, getting your Radiant Greninja as well is an option, but Irida, great card here. One to consider rather would be going with a Arven, and we'll talk about why in a minute, but I like Irida's is a much better fit in this case. When we rotate, if you did want to use this deck, you're going to have to swap to Arven, but still. Now, Penny is a really good one for me. There's a few good uses of Penny. The first off is if you do get caught with the Tatsugiri in active turn 1, because that's your only basic, you can pull that Tatsugiri back to hand without losing a prize card. If without Penny, if you get caught, you're going to have to sacrifice that one. And if your opponent realizes what you're doing, which they will, who else plays a Tatsugiri without Dondonzo, then they may just opt to never knock that Tatsugiri out. They may opt to boss's orders or switch your Pokemon to where your Tatsugiri just remains on bench. So that Penny's going to allow you to at least pull it back to hand, and then you can use Ultra Balls or Professor's Research to discard that Tatsugiri later. At the same time, too, you also want to use it on your Squawkabilly. Your Squawkabilly EX is your only 2-prize card. So ideally, you want to pull your Squawkabilly back to hand as quickly as possible and then discard that one, too, after you use it turn 1, because it really can screw up the way that this deck works, right? And, we're really playing on the fact that they're taking 1 and we're often taking 2 in the same amount of time. So if they knock out your Squawkabilly before you can pull it back to hand, it can really put you behind the hourglass on this deck. So really try to do that. Then the other options too are, a lot of times I'm doing is just pulling a Dondonzo back to hand. If he's damaged and I already have one on bench ready to go, that'll help you save your double turbo energy, a lot of times your Bravery Charm, and obviously take away that damage. Penny's really good because unlike Turo's scenario, we're able to keep all attached cards as long as it's a basic, and obviously this deck only has basics. Professor's Research, I go with 3 Research, just another good way to discard our Dondonzo, our Tatsugiris, and then of course just cycle through our hand. Research is always a great card to get out of a bad hand, reset your hand, get some stuff that we need to draw. Just be careful with it. You really want to do all that's possible to avoid discarding double turbo energies or Bravery Charms. We really want to keep those, but in a pinch you're going to have to, especially if you've got a couple Tatsugiri in hand. It is worth it to go ahead and just say, you know what, we're going to lose one of these, just make sure it's not more than one. And then Bravery Charm. So this one's just a really key card. As we see, our Dondonzos have 160 base HP, which is pretty high for a basic non-2-prize card Pokemon. So if you could throw a Bravery Charm on him, then he goes up to 210. So that is going to make it many times he's going to take 2 shots to knock out. Even from things like, for example, why am I blanking on the name? Dragapult EX, sorry. Dragapult's going to take a few. You still see Lugias sometimes. In the beginning of games, Charizard EX. Those ones are actually some of my tougher matchups, because the only time Charizard EX isn't going to one-shot my Dondonzo is going to be on that first one. So you kind of want to play around, because even taking 1 prize card, 210 Charizard EX is hitting for, and it can be tough to sometimes it's going to take you 3 turns to knock out that Charizard if we're not quite ready. But overall, this Bravery Charm really makes it to where oftentimes it's going to take 2 turns to knock out your Dondonzos. Then from there, not listed up here, but we'll go into our energies, which is the double turbo energy. I've been mentioning that throughout. With the double turbo energy, that's all you need to attach to your Dondonzo so that he's ready to attack. It will minus the 20 though, so especially early on, it can really feel like he's not dealing damage. In fact, even up until you have 4 of them discarded, the difference between 130 and 180 is oftentimes the difference between taking 2 and 3 turns to knock out your opponent's Pokemon. So that's why it's super crucial to get those Tatsugiris in discard as soon as possible, because this minus 20 does make a pretty big difference. In fact, the difference between 130 and 150 damage is often enough to knock out Pokemon, especially these EXs now that are going over 300 HP. It's tough. So you do want to use these double turbos as quickly as possible and get your Tatsugiris in discard. Then from there, we have 10 total energy, so the other 6 are going to be water energy. In terms of strategy for this deck, obviously, as I've been hinting at, and not really hinting at, but being very explicit about, our priority 1 is discard Tatsugiri. Do everything you can to discard your Tatsugiri, while at the same time balancing up, loading up your Dondonzos on your bench, or even in active, so that they're ready to go as soon as you've got it. You want to obviously attack as quickly as possible, even if we're only dealing between 30 to 80 damage for 2 discarded Tatsugiris. But that is our priority, right? Is discarding Tatsugiri. Then from there, double turbo energies. We want to get those double turbos attached so that we can attack quickly and really save our water energies for using with Radiant Greninja so that we're able to continue to draw, because that's going to help us get things like our Bravery Charms, which we don't have any other card to draw. It's going to help us get our Night Stretchers so that we can just pull those waters back, energy Lotos and things of that nature. So really focus on attaching your double turbos, and then using your Greninja to discard the waters. A lot of times let's say I have one water energy, and I don't have a double turbo in hand, I have an attached return, I'm always going to concealed cards and take a chance, even if it means I don't attach an energy per turn. I would much rather do that, right? From there, just thin out that deck. Once you've got enough Dondonzo on bench, you've got your Tatsugiris in discard, work on thinning that deck out using Ultra Balls, using researches, so that, when your opponent starts trying to stall things out and, messing around with these cards that are going to reduce your hand size and things like that, Iono, Roxanne, whatever that may be, then you're able to make sure that you're getting the cards you need, and just thinning out too, so that even top decking, you want to top deck a boss's orders a lot of times so that you can get that card they just retreated back into the active, things like that. After that, you can just profit. A lot of times they're not going to be able to take prizes faster than you can knock out, because Dondonzo is a single prizer. Strengths and weaknesses. I don't know, let's throw up the Squawkabilly. I just want something up here. The strengths, it's obviously a single prize deck, except for Squawkabilly, so use your penny as quickly as possible to get him back up. So it's a single prize deck. It's all basics, so it makes it really quick to get going, especially considering if we can get a double turbo energy, then we also only need one energy. So it's a very quick deck if all things go our way, and really we don't need like a ton to go our way because of the way that this deck is set up with its supporters. It's pretty easy to get what you need in hand quickly, and a lot of times what that means too is you can already start attacking and get that advantage of damage before they're even ready to go. For some of those other decks that need things like evolutions and 3 to 4 energies to start attacking, your Dondonzo you can hit for 1 energy, right? And a lot of times, like I said, you're having 2-for-1 prizing. 210 HP on a basic 1 prize Pokemon is pretty good. A lot of times, as I said, it's going to be, there are obviously some decks that are just going to hit you and knock him out really quickly, but we're doing okay there. Very easy to prep, very quick, all basics. It's a pretty consistent deck as well. The weaknesses are the discarding Tatsugiri. It is hard sometimes to do that, and especially the mechanics of that. Like, we only have 3 Ultra Balls and 3 Professor's Research. We do have our Blender, but occasionally too we may have an issue where we've got, sure, we draw our Brilliant Blender and we discarded 2 Tatsugiri with it, but the other 2 are prized, and how are we going to get this Hisuian Heavy Ball in hand? You can do that with an Irida, but there are times where I get really hamstrung and it takes me a long time to set up this deck. It is rare, but that's a big weakness of it. If you can't get this going quicker than your opponent, and they're able to just get to a point where they can one-shot your cards, or just start like bossing up your bench and knocking them out so that you're not ready to go, it can be an issue, and then from there, obviously you need the double turbo energy, which we only have 4 of in the deck, so sometimes you're also having issues with getting your double turbo energies ready to go. Or sometimes I've had a time where I had 3 double turbos in hand and like 2 pennies or something, and what am I going to do? I can either just sit and hope that I top deck something good, or I'm going to have to use one of these to concealed cards and discard one. So it can be a little bit tricky sometimes, and you have to make some decisions on depending on how quickly your opponent is getting themselves set up. And then another weakness really is that the max you're going to do in a turn is 180. So there are some decks where that's going to be an issue. Like, I'm really thinking about like this deck's biggest weakness that I faced are like those Charizard decks where they're going to one-shot you after you just take 2 prize cards. And if I don't have all, the only way I'm going to take 2 turns to knock out the Charizards to even out our prizing is if I have all in discard. Like for example, if I only have 3 of my Tatsugiri in discard, I'm only hitting for 130. That's going to take me 3 turns to knock out a Charizard, so that can be tough. And really the max is 180, so that can make this deck really struggle sometimes. Other cards to consider compared to like any other deck, this one is like the smallest list. I really perused. I did my best to think about like what would I swap out. I even looked at the upcoming Prismatic Evolution set, which hasn't dropped at the time of me recording this, but will have dropped by the time this video drops. And I couldn't find really anything that I liked or anything that I'd consider except for these 3 cards. You know, the Arven over Irida is something to think about if you want to really guarantee yourself to get your Bravery Charms in hand. You know, it does give you the item along with Irida, but I do find that probably is better off to be able to grab the Pokemon and the item card and just, you know, kind of hope and pray that we grab a Bravery Charm. Hero's Cape is something that you may consider as the ace spec instead. Obviously, we're going to be able to get our Tatsugiri from 210 to 260 HP, which is really good for that. But you know, overall, I think that like, is it really going to help us not get one shot much more often? And we're only going to use it for 1 time. So overall, I think I would probably rather not use a Hero's Cape and just, you know, go with my Bravery Charms. Luxurious Cape is one to think about. Similarly, you know, grabbing 100 more HP, but the problem is then it turns this deck into a 2 prize deck because they're going to take another prize card. So the way that I would consider using Luxurious Cape if I did would be on my like final Tatsugiri. You know, let's say if I am at that last one, you know, they've taken 5 prize cards already, like, okay, we're going to throw a Luxurious Cape on, then he's going to have some extra HP, get super ultra beefy, and hopefully it'll buy us the time that we need to win. But again, I think I would rather not. I'm just going to kind of keep this deck as is, and you know, we'll go from there. Well, that will do it for us on this episode of the Hawks Pokemon Nest. What do you think of the Tatsugiri Dondonzo deck? Dondonzo to make your opponent Dunzo, that's what I'll call it. We will be testing that out in our next video that we do. That's not an unboxing, so we'll be testing that out soon. Make sure that you stay tuned. But before then, before you leave, you know, please hit that subscribe button and become part of the Hawks Nest. We are a fearless flock of fabulous folks who are loving to do what we love. I love Pokemon. I want to be able to keep doing this forever. I love making these crazy decks. I'm excited for this new set that's coming out that, as I mentioned, will have dropped by the time this video comes. And I've already got some good ideas I'm cooking up on how I want to work with some of these new evolutions in there. So you'll be seeing some decks on that. So make sure that you stay tuned. But if you're not quite ready to fly yet, understandable, you know. But please make sure that you hit that like button so that we can show up again in an algorithm near you. But until then, we will see you next time.